In the box whisker system, we don't use z-score for position. So what is more typical is to use percentiles. Let's get an example. In fact, we're going to use a different example finally. A major history paper is assigned. Each student is asked to keep track of how much time they spend on the project. Below are the times from the students. Here we are. Now what we should do is ask sort of a percentile question. Spending 5 hours on the project would be what percentile? The first thing we need to do to make sense out of this is order it. All right, so let's sort ascending. I put these into L1. So the question is, 5 hours. There's 5 hours. And what we mean by percentile, I haven't actually talked about percentile and what that means, is really what percent of the data is this value or less. So what percent of the data? Well, that value or less represents 5 numbers out of a total of 22 numbers. So percentile is a fairly straightforward calculation. This would be the 23rd percent. Now 5 hours represents the 23rd percentile, right? It's kind of low, right? Not many of the students did that number of hours or less. If we have another question, spending 8 hours on a project would be what percentile? Well, this is a little bit different. There was only 1 5 in the data set. Notice that there are 4 8s, so kind of how do you deal with that? You go back to the definition, right? 8 or less would be, of course, including all of the 8s. That's 15 numbers and would be the 68th percentile. Now, what happens if you have the percentile and want the data value? Like the 80th percentile would be how many hours spent on this history paper. Well, that's going a little bit backwards. We need a formula for that. And we've been calculating percentile using, I'm saying R for row, I guess. That's position in the data list, in the ordered data list. There are 22 numbers. Of course, this will change depending on the data set. And so if we want the 80th percentile, plug in 80, divide both sides by 100, multiply both sides by 22, right? And we get the 17.6th number in the list. Of course, there is no 17.6, so are we talking about the 17th or the 18th? Well, you have to be careful here. Yeah, 17 or 18th is about the 80th position out of the 22, but we're not talking about hours, we're talking about position. This kind of gets you in the right ballpark, but we're going to have to test. So the real question is, what percentile is 9 hours? Is that the 80th percentile? We can test that one right there. There are 16 numbers, 9 or less, so that's 73rd percentile. Well, what about 10 hours? Well, that jumps up to the 95th percentile. So is there a number of hours which is exactly the 80th percentile? Well, no, not really. What this calculation did was kind of get us into the right ballpark of the data. We then kind of tested. And really, which one is the closest to the 80th? I would probably go with 9 hours.